So next on the agenda with Zeus is to build a sub box for the trunk. I'm just going to be using a 10-inch Pioneer sub that I have had for quite some time in a few different vehicles. It's a decently high-end 10-inch sub, so nothing huge. But I don't want to take up a lot of room in the trunk because I'll be transporting some 18-inch spares and jack and tools and all that stuff to drift events back there. So I'm just going to put a single 10 in there. That should suffice. And so what I've done is I've gone online here and I have brought up the specs for this 10-inch Pioneer subwoofer here. And I'm going to do a ported box. So with the ported box and the subwoofer I have, the volume is going to be 1.1 cubic feet. I'm calling for a 3-inch diameter port, 7 inches long, and they're giving you the width, height, and depth of the box, but that's probably not going to work for what we want, but we can just use the 1.1 cubic feet as a general rule here. And then if you look down here, it says for tight it's 0.9, recommended 1.1, for deep 1.5. We got to do a minimum of 0.9 cubic feet, but really we want to hit that 1.1 mark. And so I think our box is going to wind up being a little wider and a little taller, so the depth doesn't need to be as much. But this subwoofer, you can see, has a decent depth to it, and we're gonna have to have some room behind it in the box as well. And so we're gonna get started on making a box. It should be pretty simple. The floor towards where the rear seats are is not very flat, unfortunately. Let me grab a flashlight so we can see. You can see there's a few things going on here. This back part has a couple wires underneath it where it kind of kicks up at a little angle there. And then the sides is where the frame rails go through. So what I'm gonna do first is just build out a piece of MDF that just acts as the base that the box will actually sit on top of. That'll just be able to space it up enough that then we can use the full width of the trunk and the full depth of the trunk. I want to make the box nice and form-fitting, but not too hard to remove. The other thing I want to do too is I want to have the amp that I have for this setup, which is a Pioneer amp that is matched really well to the sub. The sub has a 1100 peak and 250 nominal wattage range, and that's what this amp outputs. And then I have a power capacitor too here. So I want to be able to mount the amp and the capacitor hidden to the back side of the box. All right, well, I've moved the whole wood cutting operation outside. Cutting this MDF in here was coating every single thing in sight. I just finished fully detailing the G, and Zeus is already completely filthy with dust after just a couple of cuts. I was going to give it a spray wax before I put it away for winter in a couple of weeks after I'm done with all of the work and mods anyways, but it's just getting too chaotic in here. It's pretty cold outside, it's like 20 degrees out, but I'd rather cut all the wood out there and then come in here and deal with it. So now we're set up outside to do that. I got a couple more boards to cut real quick, and then I can keep making some measurements and go from there on the sub box. So. So we have an inner dimension, 22 and a half, 22.5 by 15. Now, the box gets skinnier at the front than the back, so I'm just gonna do a simple, let's call that 5, and let's call that 10. Half of that is 7.5. So we'll call the average depth 7.5. We divide that by 1728, and let's see what our cubic feet of the box is here. So we got 22.5 inches, times that by 15 inches, times by 7.5 inches, and then we divide it by 1728, and we have a 1.4648. So 1.46 inner cubic foot area. And it's probably just a little less than that because of the estimation I did here. But that will work very good. The specs were 0.9 to 1.5, so we're a little on the high end for that. And so now I'm gonna put the box back in the car, and we're gonna work on doing a template for the front. All right, I got the box done. Turned out pretty good. Next step is going to be to take it all back apart and glue it together with wood glue, and then countersink all of the screw holes so that the screws fit flush. Alright, so we got the kind of port barriers here trimmed out. Got one of them installed, you can see right here. It's about 6.5 inches long, and these triangles are 3 by 3, and so that will give us the area that is required for having these two ports and this big of an enclosure with this subwoofer. Alright, so I have the main power cable routed all the way to the back of the trunk now. I connected it to the positive terminal here. We have the fuse sitting back there. We went through a factory grommet down to the passenger side kick well here, footwell, and routed it along the rocker panel. Here we tied in to the factory speaker wires for the speaker wire to RCA converter. And then we have the wires passing up under here, under the rear seat. And they come out through a hole that was conveniently located right over here. I used a punch to make the hole a little bit bigger and make it so that it wouldn't chafe the power wire here. And so now we have our speaker signal wire and our power wire routed to the trunk. So the next step is going to be wiring in the speaker wire to RCA converter and routing this to the speaker box. This will go to the capacitor and then go from the capacitor to the amplifier, and then we'll get all of the panels back in the trunk here, get the box in place, and test it out before we start putting any of the rest of the panels back together. Alright, I got the sub box all wrapped up and ready to install. We got the capacitor mounted up over here with the speaker wire receptacle. Got everything taped up cleanly and routed with some P-clamps. Got the ground for the capacitor. The power wire and speaker wires route down along the back here up to the amplifier. We have the ground for the amplifier, and this is for the remote switch that will tie into the ignition, so the amp knows when to turn on and off. And everything else is in the trunk here. Got the main power wire coming back from the battery, and then we have a jumble of wires over here. I left everything extra long so that I can connect it when the sub box is up here and then shove it back, so it's going to be a little less tedious. I have a couple of studs welded on each side of the frame rail under these panels here for the ground for the capacitor and for the amp. So that's going to be the trickiest part, is fishing the wire back in there and getting that all connected. Just have to tweak these panels a bit. And then we have the wire for the base level adjuster, and everything has been tested and is good to go. So now it's time to put the box in the trunk, get that all installed, and then we have to put the interior back together here. I got the rear seat out so that we could route the power wire, and I had to use a converter from the speaker wires to the RCA because it's the stock head unit, and so I had to tie in to the left and right wires right here in this panel, and the main power is routed all the way along the rocker. I still have to take the sub-level wire and route that through the center console and mount that switch up. So I'll get the box mounted and then I'll get working on getting all the interior back together.
Some neighbors are saying way too loud.
That's only in the morning. He supposed to be up cooking breakfast.